there was this young man who he and I went to the same school, and he had a likeness for me. I didn't know. So by this time, I had graduated from school in my fifth year, graduated from school. I mean, seriously, he just said that to me, and I was like, "Are you serious, sir?" And he said, "Yes." Tell me, who was your favorite teacher? What you liked about that person? And what's your favorite teacher moment? How I became a teacher. Very strange. Growing up as a child, I wanted to become an accountant. At one point, I remember thinking I wanted to become a nurse. But as time progressed, I realized that I have a fear for cuts and bleeding, probably because of a murder I witnessed when I was a child. I had a change of heart. So when I was about 16 years old, I was attending high school, and while at high school, I was appointed the deputy head girl of the school. And as of such, whenever time a teacher is not present, it is my responsibility to go to the classes and make sure that the children are settled until the teacher gets there. So that was normally something that I enjoyed doing. I was always an assertive person growing up, and I do exhibit leadership qualities. So I was also very caring and somebody who is warm and pleasant, but I can also be very firm, okay? And so, being a prefect, I command the respect of both teachers and students alike. And so when I go to a class to settle them, it was never ever a problem. It's quite easy for me to get children to be settled, and I normally give them some work and have them do it until their teacher gets there. So one day in particular, before I talk about what happened, the school normally streams students. So you have like 8-1, 8-2. What am I talking about? 8A, 8B, 8C, 8D. So each of the class are streamed that way, with the brightest being in A and the slowest students being in D. So this particular morning, there was this class that was very boisterous, very loud and noisy, and I decided, it was on the second floor of the school, so I decided to go up there to settle the students. When I went there, I found it was the 8D class, so you know what that means, right? It's the slowest set of students, and they were there quite noisy. I entered the room, and they were so busy, and probably the angle from which I entered, they didn't even notice that I was there. So pretty much they were continuing their boisterous behavior and playing and talking. I mean, they're 8th graders, and it was like the beginning of the school year, so they're barely leaving from 7th grade, going over into 8th grade. When I went there, they were quite noisy, and they didn't acknowledge my presence. Some did and stopped talking, but the majority were talking. So I said to them, I raised my voice, and I said, so early in the morning, it was the first session for the morning, and I said, so early in the morning, you students are so noisy. Are you telling me that you can't find something productive to do until your teacher gets there? And I addressed them down quite nicely, and they all settled down. They were quite receptive, and they settled, and they became quite quiet, and I gave them some work to do. While I was standing there, I didn't know, right, that a teacher was next door, because next door was the art department or the art room, and the art teacher was there. Normally the vocational areas, the teachers remain in their room. I didn't know he was there, Mr. Stevenson. And he just came next door to the class, and he placed his hand on his arm on the board, And he said, "You were the person here all along talking?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "I really thought it was a teacher who was here." And he commended me, of course, for the good job I did. And, that's just where the inspiration came from to become a teacher, because by that time I was in 10th grade and I was just a year away. So pretty much I would continue teaching. In addition to that, as a small child, I remember in the community where I grew up, or two communities I grew up in, I would always use the opportunity to read Bible stories and make questions and question the young ones that I was reading for. So it was a part of me. Okay, so that is where the inspiration came from, but that's not how I became a teacher. There was this young man who he and I went to the same school, and he had a likeness for me. I didn't know. So by this time, I had graduated from school. In my 5th year, graduated from high school. So I was home one day, and while I was home, I noticed the young man came. He didn't come to my house because my father was sitting on the veranda. So he came and he stood a distance off. Of course, I didn't know he came to see me, but I was wondering why, for whatever reason, he was living in an adjoining community. So I was wondering, why would he actually be in my area? So he was there, and he was there for a while. And, I eventually, went out and talked to him to find out why he was there. He didn't say anything to me to the sort of having an interest in me or anything. He was just there. And I'm a very talkative, warm and friendly person, very accommodating. So I pretty much just treated him as one of my schoolmates and accommodated him. But of course, I wasn't stupid. Must be a reason why he came, right? But I had this thing about me, and I still do. I grew up as a Christian person, and so I use every opportunity I can to use the Bible to have Bible discussion with person, helping them to appreciate what the Bible really teaches. And so I was having a discussion with him. That same evening, I was on my way to worship. So he accompanied me to worship. Yes, he did. And it hadn't started yet. So we basically were standing outside of the building, and I was there talking to him. But of course, it was all about the Bible that I was talking to him. I'm sure by that time his interest had waned, and he was probably annoyed by the fact that, he came on a different note and I wasn't encouraging it. Anyway, we had the Bible discussion, and it was time for the service to start, so he left. Interestingly, I didn't know that I was being listened to. There was this gentleman who was visiting. I saw the vehicle, but I didn't know who owned the vehicle or who he was related to or why. But one thing I know is that he stepped out of the building and he came to me. And he said he was eavesdropping, and he noticed that I have a voice like a teacher, if I would love a job as a teacher. I mean, seriously, he just said that to me, and I was like, "Are you serious, sir?" And he said yes. He then explained to me that he is a principal of a school, and that he would be more than happy to employ me as a teacher, as a pre-trained teacher, if I'm interested. Of course, that was in the 90s, and at that time the Ministry of Education would accommodate persons with just CXCs or SSCs to become teachers. So, semi-ton teacher, right? Okay. That's how I became a teacher. I got the inspiration first from my teacher at school, my art teacher, and then after that this gentleman just found me. His name is Mr. Lionel Henry, and I've learned a lot from him. He was a very strict principal, very knowledgeable person, and so he guided me a lot. He spent the time to give me the different skills that I needed to become a teacher, and showed me how to write lesson plans and how to deliver my lesson. Let me tell you something interesting. In high school, I used to be involved in debating. So pretty much, as a debater, they would select the most well-spoken persons, or, who is able to deliver or speak. It's good in public speaking. And so over time, representing the school, I became good at speaking properly and, making proper presentations. So I entered the school. It's a rural school, deep rural school in St. Catherine. And so I went to the school and started speaking properly because I'm a teacher. And of course, the students, at that time, they didn't have much exposure. At that time, the school went up to grade 9, grade 7 to 9, and I taught grade 7 to 9. It's a multi-grade school, and what I mean by multi-grade is that the grades are small, so what they would do is combine all of them, and you have to either form grouping to teach them, or you find different strategies to make sure that they get their content, properly as it relates to their grade, or you can group them according to their abilities. So that was basically what I had to do. However, what I found interesting was I was there talking. The principal's office was next door, and he came to the door and said he wanted to speak to me. So I said, "You want me now, sir?" And he said, "Yes." So I left the students, I asked excuse, and I went to him. When I went there, he said to me, "That strategy that you're using will not work." I'm saying, "I don't understand what you mean, sir." He said, "You're speaking in standard English and these students are not understanding it quite well. You need to speak in their language, or their mother tongue, which is Patois, so that they'll be able to understand." Of course, I found this quite offensive because growing up, I used to be well spoken, and I just didn't appreciate him asking me to speak broken language to the students. And then, this is teaching, for crying out loud. Why would I want to speak that way when I'm supposed to be modeling the language for the students to emulate? So of course, I listened, and he said, "I'm going to do you a demonstration." So he called the student, and he said to him, "I'm going to change the name, okay?" So he called the student, and he said to him, "Where is your mother?" And the boy said, "E?" He said, "Where is your mother?" And the boy with his hand behind him said, "E?" And he said to him, and I'm not making this up, "Where your mama de?" And the boy's response was, "Run a yard, teacher, run a yard." And he asked another question, "What's your mother's name?" The child didn't understand. He said, "What your mama name?" "Mabel, teacher, Mabel." And he said, "Thank you," and he sent him back to his class. I was aghast, honestly, because I am from a rural community, but of course the exposure was better than where I was teaching. So he said to me, "Try to see if you can come down to the language of the students so that they'll be able to understand you, because it does make sense you are teaching if they are not understanding." And for most part, that is how I had to teach, and the students pretty much understood. Of course, in Jamaica, different communities have different jargons that they use for certain things, and so if you say certain things, they won't understand. I remember when I was talking to them and I said fern, and they didn't understand what I mean by fern, because they call fern fearing. And of course, you have to understand different communities have different ways of expressing themselves, or different names for stuff in Jamaica. So that was how I became a teacher. Now, what I like about teaching, definitely, I love to mold young minds. I like to motivate them. I think I'm a very excellent motivator. I like to have them believe in themselves. And I love to see academic progress. And so, whatever I can do to ensure that a child progress and make good progress is what I would do. Another time, I'm going to tell you about my incentive program that I use. It's an incentive dinner that I have annually. Next time, I'm going to tell you about that and what result it has yielded over the years. Unfortunately, we didn't have it this academic year. It's normally held in May, which is Child's Month, but it wasn't held this year because of COVID-19. But come this or next May, we're definitely going to have it. Zoom it will be once COVID is still around.